Hey there, it's Taylor Reeh here with my co-host Ryan. If you have story suggestions, news tips, corrections, or comments on anything we discuss on our show, please contact us by commenting on our Facebook page, facebook.com/1pvs2p, on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast, or by emailing us, podcast@1pvs2p.com.
You can also record a voicemail or send a text to 571-418-GAME. That's 571-418-4263.
Record or write in, and we might just read or play your message on our next episode. The Nintendo Switch will hit store shelves on March 3rd this year, and Ryan is with me here to give me his hands-on impressions from a preview event he went to this past weekend. You're listening to the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Reeh, and with me in person this time, normally we do this over Skype, is my brother and co-host, Ryan Reeh. Welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. It's not like we haven't seen each other the past couple days, but yeah, no, this is great. Normally we do this remotely, Ryan living in Chicago, me being in DC. But Ryan, you actually had to fly here to go to this press event that Nintendo hosted here in Washington, DC. There they had a bunch of the launch titles for the Nintendo Switch, and you got to touch the thing itself, right?
Absolutely, right. It was about me, and I would estimate about 100 people who came to this event. Nintendo, of course, doing this kind of like Mall of America style tour, where they're taking this to major American cities before the Switch comes out in March. And yeah, it was, I won the ticket lottery and got a chance to get my hands on the hardware, get a feel for some of the games, got to play with the different controller configurations, got to see the thing in person. Yeah, I have some thoughts and opinions.
You pretty much played every single title they've announced thus far, except for just a couple, right?
Right. So let me read you a quick list of the games that they had for display there. They had Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, 1-2 Switch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, Snipper Clips, Fast RMX, Just Dance 2017, Skylanders Imaginators, Ultra Street Fighter 2, Has-Been Heroes, Super Bomberman R, Disgaea 5 Complete, Sonic Mania, and Puyo Puyo Tetris.
So among those, which are the ones that you didn't play at this event?
So I did not play Snipper Clips. That had kind of a really long line, and that really needed two people to play cooperatively. I did not play Just Dance 2017, and I did not play Skylanders Imaginators. Of course, Skylanders on a bajillion other platforms, and Just Dance, of course, Ubisoft showing up on launch day, like they always do. And of course, Just Dance is going to be multi-platform as well. The only game that on this list that I'm bummed out that I didn't get to play was Snipper Clips. That seems to be, from what I understand, a lot of critics are really excited for that cooperative puzzle-style game. But I really just saw footage of that. I didn't really get a chance to play it myself. So, but I can speak to the other games. So Nintendo set up in this warehouse in a very shady part of DC. You know, this is if you've seen the Microsoft commercials, the ideal setup for the Kinect is basically imagine that kind of warehouse. Of course, the perfect setting in Nintendo Switch commercials for your friend's party or rooftop, or all these hashtag millennials playing Mario Kart at these parties. I would say that of the crowd that was there, it was people from all walks of life, all ages, adults, children, and it was really interesting to see the people who came out to this event. It seems to be Nintendo's target demographic. I heard from people at the event that they are looking for a Wii-like response for the Nintendo Switch. If some of the people I talked to are any indication, I think they're going to get a variation of that a little bit. I think people were really excited. Of course, this is a big marketing event. They only invited people who were really interested in this product, who probably more than likely already have it pre-ordered. And the people I talked to were very excited about this thing. Of course, noting that the last Nintendo product that they bought, the Wii U, was not quite the hit that they were expecting. A lot of people told me that they were excited that the Switch was finally going to bring the premise of the Wii U actually to life, the possibility of portable gaming and full console gaming on the go with Nintendo's seal of approval, with their standard build quality, and the ability to play Nintendo game, like full board Nintendo games mobily without the kind of, handheld versions of those, which can be good, but I think people were looking for more from those kinds of experiences.
For people who don't, and I've had this conversation with you privately before, not on the show, but basically there aren't a lot of people out there running around with gaming laptops. And even with that, they're not very portable. These things are clunky and heavy. And I'm personally looking forward to, not having played the Nintendo Switch yet, but I'm personally looking forward to the full-fledged console-level AAA titles playing on the go. You look at the 3DS, for example, the dual screens and the iPad, things like that. These games are designed for those platforms, and they're not, full open worlds, games like that. So I just think that the prospect of the Switch is a very interesting one. It's a huge game changer. Nintendo always does these wacky pioneering things in the industry. And I'm very anxious to see, the reception about this when it launches, because I think overall there's a good impression about this launch lineup. And I want to hear your specific thoughts, primarily about, let's start off with Zelda Breath of the Wild, because I think that's the one most people are looking forward to. Of course, Breath of the Wild is also going to be released on the Wii U. I imagine a lot of people are pre-ordering the Switch specifically for this game immediately. What do you think about that?
Right. So at this event, the Breath of the Wild was so popular that they had to actually ticket specific times to go to this thing. They had a lot of stations for Breath of the Wild, about 16 or so that people could play on. We each got about 15 minutes to play a little section of the game. This is the very beginning of the game. It starts, the premise is you wake up in a temple. Link wakes up from kind of a slumber in this kind of like Matrix-like sunbathing tube that he wakes up in. Miraculously, he's wearing shorts because Nintendo. Anyway, he doesn't have any items. He doesn't have his tunic. He doesn't have the Master Sword. He has nothing. And he comes out of this tomb and he picks up this Sheikah tablet that basically serves as your inventory and menu screen options. There isn't a second screen like there are in a lot of Zelda games, like in Ocarina of Time, let's say. It's not
or Majora's
right.
Mask.
It does open up like a pause menu when you have to sift through your inventory or you want to look at the mini map or anything like that. But this tablet is a little more functional. It kind of serves as your guide. It serves as your waypoint. Since this is an open world Zelda game, this game feels like the Zelda game where Nintendo kind of played a lot of Skyrim, played a lot of Assassin's Creed. And they're making a very open world, not direct, you can explore the dungeons in any order you want. Also, there are, stop me if you've heard this before, there are towers that you can climb to unlock more of the map. But in order to do that, you climb the tower and then you place the tablet in this little altar at the top. And that helps you unlock the map and helps you decide where you should go next.
Could you tell by the short time that you played this game, could you tell that these towers were repetitive? Was it as simple as just climbing it up, or was there some sort of puzzle element to get towards the top? Or
well, in the tower that I climbed, it was basically I teleported up to the top of the tower once I kind of reached the base. Then I did the thing where I put the tablet in the stone, got the map, and then the puzzle part of it was climbing down from the tower. In most Assassin's Creed games, the hard part is trying to get to the top, and then you just jump off into a bale of hay. Zelda, this game appears to be going the other way about it and making more of the challenge coming way down without dying, because you can't just jump off. He'll disappear and you'll have to start all over again. I would say that in the short 15-minute demo that I had, there's some interesting mechanics for sure. They have a cooking system in there. You can pick up. There aren't really hearts anymore to pick up to gain health pickups. You can pick up apples. You can pick up meat. You can cook items to give them more health effect to restore your health. The art, I have to say that the art style of this game is fantastic. It looked beautiful, very stylized. I would say somewhere between Wind Waker and Twilight Princess in terms of graphical fidelity. Very stylized. How much do you like durability in games?
I hate it. I think it's an obnoxious mechanic. I rarely see it done well. I can't remember the last time it's been done effectively.
Well, there is durability in this game. You can equip Link with different kinds of... There's loot in this game, so you can equip him with different kinds of shirts, different pants that gives you different armor values. You can also pick up different weapons. Sometimes the enemies drop them, sticks, bombs, that kind of thing.
Oh, so this is one of the very few Zelda games that really implements stats here, pure stats. I can't recall one where you're picking up random loot that assigns different values to keep track of.
Right. So there's an offense stat based on the kind of weapon that you're holding. The weapons break after. Well, I picked up a stick and a club that one of the enemies was using, and I got about 5 swings with each before they broke. And the game actually recommends in a tooltip that if your weapon is about to break, you can throw it at the enemy and it'll do double damage of double whatever the base value is. So the stick was, let's say, attack value of 2. If it's about to break and you throw it, it will hurt the enemy for 4 damage or whatever it is. But other than that, there seems to be some kind of nods to older Zelda games. I walked by an area that was, it said Temple of Time next to it. So I'm not sure where in the Zelda timeline or in the universe this is, but it definitely felt very much like a game set in Hyrule for sure. They mentioned Calamity Ganon, who's of course the bad guy. We don't know what his motivations are. People who play Zelda for the story are going to be interested in that. Before the end of the demo, I got to the first temple, and then the game ended. I would say the other thing that may surprise you is that a lot of Zelda games, because they appear on Nintendo platforms, have been kind of smaller in scope, and they really haven't had to have loading times. And when I got to the temple, I had to, of course, walk in, and there was a significant loading time. I would say it took about 30 seconds, and I'm sure that I'm not sure if they'll address this in a patch or whatnot, but it kind of felt like a really long time. I had the chance to read like 5 tooltips in the span of, it was like waiting for us to load into a Skyrim dungeon.
But specifically, were you playing this game in portable mode or while it was docked on a TV?
So I was playing this while it was docked to the TV. They gave us the Joy-Con with the charging cradle in the middle.
The grip?
The grip, right. So that grip is not going to come standard. There's a plastic dumbed down version that's not going to be able to charge your Joy-Cons that is coming in the box.
It's literally the same grip where you can dock the 2 left and right Joy-Cons, but one charges and one doesn't. And the one that doesn't charge is the one that's included with the Switch. Anyone who pre-orders it is going to receive it, which is weird to me. You have to buy this extra accessory. I think it's $30 or $40.
Right. And I would say actually of the controller configurations that I got to test out at this event, I would say the charging cradle or the plastic one that comes standard is probably the most comfortable. It kind of resembles somewhere halfway between if there was a child of an original Xbox controller and the GameCube controller. You don't think of those 2 controllers as being comfortable to hold or necessarily great to play with, but that was the way to me it felt the best. I think the configuration with the Pro controller, which they sell separately for $70, felt for a $70 controller felt very cheap, and it didn't have a lot of weight to it. It didn't feel like a very premium controller. We've had better. I think the Wii U Classic controller was actually a lot better build quality and more resembled a typical dual stick standard controller. I also think that if you're playing this game in portable mode with the 2 Joy-Cons on the side of the tablet, that was pretty comfortable, but I wouldn't want to do that if I'm playing at home. I would more accept that if I didn't have my plastic cradle thing, or if...
When you're saying plastic cradle, you keep saying the grip, right?
The grip, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the grip. It was pretty comfortable for a tablet experience, but...
No, wait a minute. Back up for a second. I'm confused at this point. You're saying it's a tablet experience, but you're saying when it's in portable mode, right? It has a kickstand.
Correct.
You can still use the 2 Joy-Cons with the grip,
yes,
separately, so they don't have to be docked on either side of the screen. Correct.
Correct. They do not. They do not have to be.
Okay, got it.
They're imagining that probably most people will either lose this grip or not have the grip or hate the grip or what have you, and they just want to carry around the tablet with the 2 Joy-Cons attached to it.
And that acts, if you were to picture this in your mind, just like the Wii U, that configuration, right?
Basically, correct.
Right.
And I would say the worst controller configuration is actually the separate Joy-Cons if you're playing a 2-player game, or if you're connecting Switches and you're playing a 4-player game, or if you're going to a really rich person party and you have Switches connected so 8 people can play. The left Joy-Con as a single controller, imagine the Wii remote has just as many buttons as the Wii remote. The left remote is actually totally fine because the analog stick on that controller is properly placed so that when you hold it, it's on the left hand where you might expect it.
Feels natural.
It feels very natural. On the right Joy-Con, this is the little brother Player 2 controller because the stick on that controller is off-center and horrible.
It's more towards the middle on a very small controller already.
Correct. And that does not feel very natural to hold. If you want to lose to somebody or make them hate their life, give them the Player 2 Joy-Con because playing with that, it did not feel great. Everything worked in every configuration, but I would say for me, I would probably stick to having the Joy-Cons docked in the grip, and that's probably going to be my preferred way to play most of these Switch games.
And backing up for a second, when we were talking about the Switch Pro controller, which doesn't use any of the Joy-Cons, that closely resembles the Wii U Pro controller. How is that?
It's very lightweight. I would say that the overall, the hardware, the tablet, and the Joy-Cons are very high build quality despite being plastic. They feel very durable. I saw a few people drop some of the Joy-Cons, and it didn't break. It didn't shatter into a million pieces. These things are durable. And I would say that the Pro controller felt cheap. And if I was a consumer who was interested in buying a Pro controller, I'd be, if I paid $70 for that, I would be pissed off if I opened the box and that's what I got. It was not a great controller.
It was too lightweight.
Very, very lightweight. It didn't feel like it had the right kind of, let's say, gravitas. I would also say that the hardware itself, the tablet screen that when you undock the Switch from the TV mode, felt very natural. It feels a little bit lighter than the Wii U tablet controller, but it still feels weighty enough to feel like you're holding something sizable, something durable. If you dropped it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The screen on the tablet itself is very high quality. Again, probably higher quality than the Wii U, the resolution that the Wii U tablet controller can spit out. I was told that this spat out 720p.
When in undocked mode.
Undocked mode, correct. And most of the games that I saw playing like that performed great. Now, I'm not sure about frame rates with some of these games, but that, of course, will depend on the developer and the game that we're talking about, how much stuff is on screen. But for the most part, everything looked good and everything ran very well.
Well, let's move on to a different game that you played. What else? Among the others, what were some of your favorites that you got to preview?
I would say another game that really stood out for me was Fast RMX. There was a Wii U game that was kind of halfway between Wipeout and F-Zero. And of course, Nintendo, is not going to give us another F-Zero game anytime soon. Or maybe they're releasing this game in the hope to try to see if people are still interested in the franchise. But Fast RMX is a very high-speed racer, kind of based around the idea of changing colors, much like Ikaruga, changing colors to determine like boosts that are on the track. The two colors were orange and blue. So if you saw an orange strip on the racetrack, if you were on the orange color on your car, that would give you a speed boost. If your car was blue while you were running on the orange speed boost, you'd actually slow down. So you can imagine some scenarios where they set up tracks where it's orange and then blue and you have to constantly be switching back and forth. There's a boost meter where if you, perform tricks in the air or you run along some of these boost strips, you can kind of store some energy and then activate the boost whenever you want. Very fast paced. The game ran very smoothly, which is important for an F-Zero game because if a fast moving racing game does not perform great or the frames are off or it feels stuttery, people can get sick very quickly. And, these vehicles are moving at, they say 600 miles an hour. The game felt appropriately very fast.
Like an F-Zero speed.
Correct. And I would actually say that it was one of the more fun multiplayer experiences that I got to demo out. It was a really cool game. I'm not sure how much that game costs, but it's pretty fully featured and it has a single player mode. And quite frankly, it's a lot of fun if you like racing games.
What about, speaking of racing games, what about Mario Kart? I'm anxious to hear about the improvements with that one.
So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the version that's being released on the Switch. It's basically Mario Kart 8 on the Switch. They are packing in all of the DLC that they did sell for the Wii U version, all the extra characters, all the extra tracks. They actually also added a battle mode, a proper battle mode like there was on Mario Kart 64 with the balloons and specific courses and the items. There are a few new items in the game. I didn't really get a chance to test a lot of those out, but the game felt good. It ran well. I played it both in TV mode and portable mode. There was no delay between either of them. It felt like Mario Kart. I don't really know what else to say about it.
There isn't 8-player support for that game, is there?
There is. So they're basically, with some of these games, when we'll get to this with Splatoon 2, you can actually connect the Switch via LAN and have people, much like with Mario Kart Double Dash on the GameCube, have 2 people per Switch playing split screen and up to 8 players doing it that way.
But it's local play.
It's local play. You could also have 8 players with 8 individual Switches doing that. A number of configurations where you can connect over LAN and play against each other.
But when you're saying LAN, there's no wired configuration at all. This is all wireless. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that. I didn't really get a quote on that. I didn't see a real place to plug in an Ethernet cord on the Switch unit itself. So maybe that exists on the TV dock stand. Again, I didn't see that.
It was hard to tell at this event.
It was hard to tell at this point. And I imagine if you're trying to connect wirelessly over a LAN party, I'm not sure if there's going to be
over wireless, you mean?
Over wireless. I'm not sure if 8 people are connected to the same router or the modem, if there's going to be any lag or any delay like that.
Right.
The reason that the GameCube Mario Kart worked so well was everybody was plugging into Ethernet with each other.
Yeah, it was a direct network cable. People were networked locally. It wasn't over. You're not streaming anything over wireless. Like, you're not connecting to any server. I don't know, but this could be running the same technology where, just like you would play something via online where you have a dedicated server, you're not necessarily connecting point to point with these different Switch devices. You're instead connecting to the internet on a network. So you probably have to play it somewhere that has Wi-Fi, and then that's how they make the connection there. So it could be dependent on network speeds. I'm not sure. So
who knows? Nintendo may come out with an accessory that's called like the Nintendo Hub or something like that. I imagine this is some kind of plastic thing that they could invent and sell you for the fine price of $40, let's say, and just that's how you connect Switches to each other. They also didn't say a whole lot about what their online multiplayer functionality would be, how much that was going to cost, if everybody who wanted to play with each other in a LAN scenario had to have a Nintendo account. It was not clear, and there are a number of ways that can play out. I imagine if they want this thing to take off, that at launch they're going to let the online multiplayer be free, or at least have the LAN part of it free, as long as everybody has a Switch or what have you.
Right, like local play. Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing about this whole new Nintendo account that they're going to launch, not immediately when the Switch releases, but on down the line, is that it comes free with a Super Nintendo game, right? Is that right?
An NES or an SNES game for a month.
1 month, right, exactly. But you don't get to keep them. You only get to play them for that month for free, at which point, if you decide you want to keep it indefinitely, you have to buy it outright.
Right. And we've been hearing rumors. There was a investors call where the president of Nintendo said that they were targeting a price range of about US equivalent, $20 to $30, which for what they're offering, a half of what PlayStation Plus or Xbox Games with Gold, a chat app that is you have to have a smartphone for, and the ability to play online Nintendo games for people who are interested in that. That seems about a fair price, if that is indeed the price.
And that would be for 1 year. And again, not clear whether or not it's going to be a different pricing model for 1 month, 3 months, or you can only purchase yearly. And I think it's very awkward. I don't know. I think it's very awkward that Nintendo is implementing voice chat through a separate phone app. Did they talk about that at all? Did you get to try that out?
No, they didn't have the app available. So they're delaying their multiplayer features to the release of Splatoon 2, which we'll get to what I thought of that. But yeah, I think they're going to debut it with that and see if there's a real hunger for that kind of style of app. And they didn't really get into the details, but Splatoon 2 seems to be the big multiplayer game that they're pushing for this. If there aren't enough people playing on those Splatoon 2 servers, maybe they go cheaper, maybe they make it free, maybe they make it more money because there isn't enough interest in this online service. Who knows? It could be any number of things. But what I understand is that they're going to kind of introduce it at a kind of like a trial basis, have some of the functionality, and then while they work more on, like, let's say matchmaking, some of the more added features that you might expect of an online service in 2017 with video games, then they'll start to think about charging more and more for that.
I really enjoyed Splatoon, and we can talk about Splatoon 2 at this point. What did you think about that? What were your early impressions?
So that game is more Splatoon. I don't want to shock you, but we did actually play that with 8 switches. Everybody that was played over local play.
Portable mode or docked mode?
Portable mode. It was 2 teams of 4. So 4 switches on one side, 4 switches on the other. Everybody had their own screen, of course. And they took us through the kind of tutorial where they showed you how to shoot the guns, how to fix the camera. Unfortunately, on the floor, you had to use motion controls, which on the Wii U, the original game, there was an option to have the motion controls turned on or off.
Right.
Now, I don't have much experience with the original Splatoon, but I will say that I think in the Splatoon community, people were roughly divided in about half whether they preferred the more precise aiming with the sticks or with the motion controls. For me, the motion controls were a little bit awkward. There is an option to kind of recenter your focus. And the game actually says, please recenter this so that you're in a comfy position so that when you move and aim, you're not awkwardly moving the tablet in front of you or to the side. Or let's say if you're playing Splatoon 2 on an airplane, you're not whacking your fellow passenger in the face.
You're right. Yeah, and when it comes to motion controls, though, this is only for aiming, right? It does not dictate movement. You're not moving your character in third person. You have to use the joystick in order to do that.
Correct. Yeah, you have to move the left joystick.
Okay, so that's exactly like Splatoon 1, and I personally had disabled that. I preferred just traditional twin stick first person shooting. Well, it's not a first person. That's a third person shooter, but you get what I'm saying. It's a traditional control scheme. But as far as I know you didn't own Splatoon 1, you didn't spend that much time with it. But was there a special game type that you played, or was it strictly team deathmatch? How did that work?
So we played the standard Splatoon match, where basically you have to try to paint as much of the level as possible with your team's colors while preventing the other team from doing the same. And in this demo version of the game, they had 4 weapons unlocked: the standard splat gun, this sniper rifle paint gun, the splat roller, which is kind of a wider but slower.
These are all weapons so far that were in Splatoon 1.
Right, and they also had dual pistols that were less powerful but had a very high rapid rate of fire. And then, of course, there were grenades on the paint grenades on the R button. And you also had special abilities that you could kind of use depended on the kind of weapon that you chose. So when I played the first round, I picked the dual pistols, and I got kind of this like jetpack thing that kind of resembled the jetpack in Super Mario Sunshine, where basically you build up a super meter, by splashing paint, by running around, by splatting the other characters on the opposite team. And then once that meter was all the way up, then I got to like jetpack around and do that. There were some other powers. I didn't really get a chance to use them very effectively, but from what I gather, this is more Splatoon, and if you're into that, like, good on you. They seem to have more loadouts for the kinds of clothes that you can wear. So what I can gather from the UI on this game is that the gear that you pick up and you get from playing matches and spending in-game currency or whatever is a little bit more loadout focused. So, for example, if you have gear that helps you move faster, you can probably just switch that out on the fly. And or if you have more offense or defense, or you could probably tune it so that you have certain loadouts that
in the middle of the match,
your play style or the kind of match that you're playing.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, I'm anxious to hear about Super Bomberman R. What does the R stand for? I never figured that out.
I'm not sure what the R in Super Bomberman R stands for, but that game, there hasn't been a Bomberman game in quite some time, and Bomberman is one of my favorite multiplayer experiences to have. It's a pretty simple game. You go into these arenas, you set bombs, you try to blow up the other players. Very easy to understand, can be explained in 5 minutes, right? So they had a multiplayer demo of this, and they had 4 people connected with 2 switches. Again, I'm not sure if it was online or a local play.
Was it, again, portable mode or dock TV mode?
It was dock TV mode, and they gave one player a Pro Controller and the other player a Joy-Con grip. So the two Joy-Con controllers attached to that thing in the middle. And the game was fine. It was a Bomberman game. The thing I will say is that it seemed very framey, low frame rate. It seemed to stutter a little bit, which has me a little bit concerned because I don't think Bomberman is a game that is very graphically demanding. It's
very fast paced. Anything that impacts frame rate, that's a shame with Bomberman because it's so fast.
Right. And again, I'm not sure if this is a final build of the game or not, or if it was the setting or what have you, but I was really bummed out by that. The game itself is fine. It's a very standard Bomberman game. I've heard that there's going to be a single player story mode. They had this mechanic, and I think they've had this in other previous Bomberman games before, where if you get blown up, you're kind of out, but you get to like set bombs in kind of like a minecart that you can ride around the level.
Yes.
And if you happen to destroy one of the other players while you're in this like ghost mode, you get back in.
Oh, that's nice. That's
right.
Great.
So it keeps the gameplay very tense. Of course, these multiplayer matches are about 3 minutes long, and if you run out the timer, the blocks start to fill in and the arena gets smaller until somebody emerges a victor. And yeah, it was a very standard Bomberman experience. The power-ups, there were no new power-ups. You know, it was kick, it was glove, it was punch.
Speed up.
The skull thing that gives you random effects. Yeah. You know, more bombs, more firepower. I'm not sure if this is a final build of the game, but if this is what we're getting, a very standard Bomberman game for $50 made by Konami, I'm not sure I would pay that price in 2017 for Bomberman. I really like Bomberman, but that was a bummer.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for something like this. I don't know. With launch titles, it's a very scary proposition. You want to encourage people to pre-order the games, but you also... pre-order the console, but you also have to make the game somewhat affordable so they can try them out. Otherwise, especially if some of these online ones, those servers are going to be dead if there aren't a lot of people who pre-owned the system, period. I wanted to ask you, before we move on to some other multiplayer games that you may have played there, when it comes to portable mode, the thing I'm most concerned about with the Switch is playing multiplayer games while in portable mode. So, for instance, right, when you're sharing a screen, like let's say you're sitting next to 3 other people, you're playing a 4-player game. Is that an ideal situation to play on one Switch on that tiny screen?
So they didn't actually they didn't demo a multiplayer game where that was actually a possibility.
It was always up to 2 per Switch? Is that? It
was always up to 2 per Switch. I didn't see any split screen games besides ARMS. And none of them were being demoed in portable mode, which is a little curious. I suspect that if you want to play multiplayer games that way, it's going to get crowded for sure. I'm not sure if all games will be split screen. The games that I did play, I can imagine a scenario where you're on an airplane and you're loading up, Ultra Street Fighter 2 or whatever. But that game isn't that complicated. It's just 2 fighters. It's a fighting game.
Yeah.
So it's not like Mario Kart that has to hit this high frame rate. The Wii U version, when you had split screen, like the frame rate dipped when you had 2 people playing on the same console. So I'm not sure what the scenarios are going to be with that. We'll have to see when we get hands on with the real thing when it comes to retail.
When the Switch was first announced, me personally, I saw the trailer that they put out, and I instantly thought this is the ideal setup for Smash players in the community. And even though Smash has not been announced for the Switch, I certainly hope that they include it on there. I think this is a perfect kind of platform for this kind of game. You were talking about Ultra Street Fighter 2, which we can talk about a little bit, but a Super Smash Brothers game would be perfect because you have all these convention goers who are sitting around massive CRT TVs. That kind of setup can be a little bit unruly. With something like the Switch, even if you're crowded around one screen, even just 2 people per one Switch, I could see that being perfect. That's the kind of experience that I would like to have with this thing. Grab your friend, you instantly, without having to carry all these extra things, if you don't have a grip or if you don't have the Pro Controller, you can literally just take off the 2 Joy-Cons, keep one for yourself, give the person you're playing with the other one, and boom, instantly you're playing something multiplayer on the same screen. And that, to me, is the most appealing part about this. What do you think about that?
So I think a game like Super Smash Brothers would work on something like the Switch. However, I think that in the Smash fighting game community, the people who are crazy and bring like N64s and CRTs or prefer the GameCube version Melee, or, there even people prefer Brawl to the more Wii U and 3DS, the newer versions of that game. Those people are, quite frankly, out of their mind. They're hardcore fans. I would expect the Switch, based on the way that hardware is and based on the way that the Joy-Cons control, I think it's more for a casual audience that isn't as interested in a complicated controller. Of course, they're selling the Pro Controller and the grip. And if you were playing a game like Smash, those two configurations are probably the way you would want to play that game. Of course, Smash is also a game that depends very much, at least in the hardcore pro scene, about counting frames and making sure that there are precise timing and movements, that there isn't any lag with your controllers if you're playing with wireless controllers. That's why they sold those GameCube controllers for the Wii and Wii U.
Right, and that little controller accessory, so you could plug those in via USB into the Wii or Wii U. Or excuse me, the Wii already had those ports natively. Like, they already had that supported on the console itself. The Wii U, you actually had to have that separate accessory where you could plug in the GameCube controllers. But here's the thing with that adapter. Could you tell from the docks that you saw, were there any special ports you didn't recognize that could perhaps be some sort of expansion accessory?
So there is a port on the bottom that I imagine is for power. And there's also a USB-C on the top of the Switch.
I could see where that could power support these extra accessories that haven't been announced yet.
Right. And there was also a headphone jack. And other than that, I really didn't see a whole lot of other ports. So I'm not sure if they're going to release a slimmer version of the Switch, which, of course, Nintendo, no stranger to hardware revisions. If they add more ports, or if they sell a special Smash version of the Switch that, the people who play Smash that way are like one step removed from building their own fight sticks for the game.
You're right.
Right.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is, right now, we don't know if they're going to support older controllers like a Wiimote, for example, GameCube controllers, and the Smash community, they treasure their GameCube controllers.
I suspect that depending on how this plays out for Nintendo, they may be, or if there are controller shortages or what have you, they may be interested, or they may be developing, firmware that allows support for a Wii remote, let's say, or a GameCube controller, or NES Classic controller or something. I can imagine scenarios where they do that. Again, nothing announced, but I can see a Nintendo that would do that.
What about the Switch's touch capabilities? Did you try any games that had that at all?
So the screen itself is a capacitive touch screen, but I didn't play any games that really forced me to do that. I suspect that Snipper Clips is a game that probably is going to be the debut touch experience for that game. I'm not sure why they made it a touchscreen if they're just really using it as a display for most games, because Nintendo has said that they're not interested in releasing games like Fruit Ninja or the games that would appear on phones, or even Nintendo's newer properties that are coming to phones like Fire Emblem Heroes or Miitopia or Super Mario Run. Sorry, Miitomo. Miitopia is a different thing. Those kinds of games that Nintendo is developing for phones and iPads and Android tablets and what have you, those games are not coming to the Switch. So why make that a touchscreen unless you're either going to develop games that do that, or you're going to make you have it built in down the line where you're going to port some of these like FTL style games, let's say, to the console. I'm not sure why you do that. Or if you do like Virtual Console and you release like DS or 3DS games.
But the thing about that is Nintendo, it doesn't seem like they have any plans to support dual screen configurations. It's either you play the Switch in portable mode, you have the screen in your hands, or you play this docked on your TV. It doesn't seem like right now it's going to be similar to the Wii U configuration where you have a second screen on your controller, on the gamepad, and then you're looking at the TV as well. You're looking at two different locations. Right now, that's not supported.
Correct. When you dock the Switch tablet controller into the dock, that screen is not active. It is charging. and then the display goes to the TV. Now, I will say that when you're playing a game and you're switching back and forth between TV and portable mode, I was actually impressed that there was very little lag, and it was like almost split second. It was like it took maybe about 2 seconds to load in.
Oh, when you mean lag, you're saying as soon as you docked it, it appeared almost instantaneously, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to some of the other games that I played here in a little bit more limited quantity. Those first few were kind of the standouts. I played a game called ARMS, which is kind of, if you've seen the trailers or gameplay footage, it's Punch-Out but with spring people. It's a game where you're in a boxing arena, you're playing against a second player or a computer AI, and you pick these boxers who have different abilities. You can switch your boxing gloves that have different abilities in battle. So you can pick the standard boxing glove, or you can pick a boxing glove that's actually, when you throw your fist, it splits into 3 mini fists. There's also one that's a little bit more of a boomerang. You throw your fist and it kind of swings around and comes back at you. This game has special abilities. So as you punch, as you dodge attacks, you build a super meter, and then each character has their own particular super that does different capabilities. So this game is halfway between gestures and also the kind of like Wii boxing that you had the Wii remote in one hand and the nunchuck in the other. That was kind of almost one-to-one with left hand, right hand jabs and uppercuts and hooks and that kind of thing. So to move in this game, you have the every player has to have 2 Joy-Cons.
One in each hand,
undocked. And to move, you actually turn the controllers so you kind of lean a little bit with them. So lean left, the character moves left. You lean right, the character moves right. You use the R button to jump. You use ZR to activate your super. And to actually punch, you throw out your fists. You punch like you would, holding it kind of like you would with like motorcycle handles. Let's say you grip the Joy-Cons like you would a fist, and punch out.
Parallel to the ground.
The default standard is you actually perpendicular.
Okay, up and down, you're holding the controllers in your fists.
Right. And then to block, you actually I forgot what the motion was for block, but the blocking motion did not feel very natural. I do remember that. And the game felt off. The controls did not feel very precise. It felt like a very sloppy, like drunken Punch-Out. And not in like a good fun way. It was.
You just described Wii boxing from Wii Sports.
Right. Like honestly, if I want a boxing game, I'm gonna go to that. Yeah. I wouldn't want to go to this like imprecise, character-based thing unless they fix it with a patch. Like, I don't think right now that game is very good. I will say it has a lot of character. The characters were very diverse. The abilities were fun to play with. The level design is not. There was kind of more standard, boxing arenas, but there was also like we played a level that was in a temple, and it had kind of levels and steps, and you had to kind of factor that in when you threw your punches and whatnot. So it has that going for it. It has style for sure, but right now I don't think the game is very fun.
The controls are off. Yeah, that's the thing I'm most nervous about when it comes to the Switch, and I think even with the Wii, how imprecise that stuff was. It was incredibly awkward, and that novelty doesn't last very long. You might try it out and you think, no, this is pretty neat, this is kind of cool, but any sort of precision or I find that those kinds of games that use those kinds of motion controls not worth it to master, because you're always going to run into that problem of, well, I'm doing something deliberate, a specific motion, and the game didn't interpret it correctly. And I really hate that about these silly motion controls.
Right. So I didn't see any sensor bars, so that's at least an improvement. It seems all gyroscopic. It was from that standpoint more precise, but the controls just felt very floaty and sluggish, and I think it's more the game than the hardware itself, to be honest with you.
Doesn't one of the Joy-Cons have an IR sensor on it?
Correct. So the right Joy-Con has an IR sensor.
And what is that used for?
So that's used for the next game that I'll talk about. Games like 1-2 Switch, where one player is holding one and the other player is holding the other Joy-Con. and that sensor is being used to kind of read the other controller, I believe. So the 1-2 Switch, speaking of the Wii, is probably the game that should be packed in with the Switch. It's a minigame collection. I believe it's about 23 minigames, and it's kind of the like proof of concept for the Switch, why you want this system, why these controllers are special.
They teach you about the motion controls.
Correct. So the 3 games that I demoed within 1-2 Switch were the cow milking minigame that there's been a lot of brouhaha about.
Who can milk the most?
Right.
Moving up and down with the controller.
Marble guessing game where you hold the Joy-Cons and you're supposed to test the HD rumble, and you're supposed to like tilt the controller back and forth to see how many marbles are in this box, and then you guess how many, and whoever's closer, whoever's precisely gets it, wins the game. And then the other game...
How did that feel? Talk about that a little bit more. Was it really precise, or you felt like it was very hard to feel that the motion?
So when I was in the 1-2 Switch spot, I saw a few people actually get the exact number of marbles. And I'd say when I played it, I was off by like 1 or 2, but the HD rumble, like the naming of that is very gimmicky. Let's be frank. It is rumble controllers have been around for a very long time. However, it did actually feel like there were real marbles. And when I shifted the controller like it were a wooden box, it did feel like I could actually tell how many marbles were in there. So it did have that going for it, which is to say probably that they can probably program some games to have very precise vibrations. Maybe there are some gameplay moments that you could do with that. That marble game was legitimately impressive. Not very fun, but impressive.
I see.
The third game that was on the 1-2 Switch demo was that quick draw minigame, where basically 2 people are facing each other opposite. They're holding the Joy-Cons as if they were pistols.
Holstered.
Yeah, it's like it's high noon. And 2 people, it says on the screen, and this is a lot of the games on 1-2 Switch are designed so that you don't look at the TV. You're looking at your opponent, and it actually instructs you to like look them in the eye, and like it's a real cowboy shootout. And so that quick draw game is basically, it counts down from 3, and then you have to, whoever is quickest on the draw, whoever shoots their gun first wins. And then it gives you the calculation of when they determine the winner. It shows you the calculation of both the gun angle that you're shooting at and also how much time it took you to draw. And you can lose this game if you shoot into the dirt, which tells you about how precise that IR sensor is. Wow. Because I saw a few people shoot into the dirt, and I was just like, wow, I could actually tell that. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
The milking game is you milking a cow with the Joy-Cons. It's actually, what it's demonstrating is that, so there are 2 buttons on the inside of the Joy-Con where they would dock into the tablet. It's,
what are they called?
I think they're like SL and SR. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But basically, you have to kind of make a stroking motion, and I'm doing. You can't see this because this is an audio podcast, but basically, you have to like stroke up and down like you would a cow's udder.
Go on.
While you're doing,
I'm getting hot over here.
While you're doing this, you have to simultaneously. So you have to press the top button to kind of like start the udder squeeze, the milking, and then you have to like in sequence, like top bottom as you're stroking. So
okay.
So I'm making a very deliberate motion here. If I get it any more detailed, we're gonna have to like put this like an adult's rating on this.
Yeah. We'll mark it as explicit. All right, let's move on. Were there any other games that felt more like, for example, Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, that instead of using motion controls or didn't feel like minigame collections, any other ones that you could highlight that you tried out?
Yeah, I would say Sonic Mania was there.
Okay.
Do you like Sonic 2, or Sonic and Knuckles?
Yes, the best of all time.
They totally made another one of those.
That's perfect.
So that game controls very well. There were 2 levels they were demoing. Green Hill Zone, of course, the first zone in Sonic. And another zone that was kind of, it looked like the casino zone, but it was a little bit more like satellites and like old-timey stuff. It was kind of like a well-done level. The Green Hill Zone had a Robotnik boss battle. Very similar. Tails is partnering up with you. You have the spin dash, which you did have that in the original Sonic games. And it's totally another one of those. Sonic, of course, having its 25th anniversary this year, and they are giving fans of the Sonic series finally delivering on that promise. This game appears to be more like those old Sonic games and not like the new crappier Sonic games. But of course, I could be falling victim to the Sonic cycle all over again. They make all these promises and then it totally craps out.
Of course, it's not a Switch exclusive.
It's not a Switch exclusive. This game is coming out on PC also. But the Switch version ran well, and it was a game that legitimately, like, I thought belonged on the Switch platform. Like, it was fun to play. So I also played Puyo Puyo Tetris. That game is, of course, not exclusive to the Switch. It already came out on Xbox One or PS4 if you imported it. It is coming to PS4 in the States localized, so you don't have to read Japanese menus. But this game is both a Tetris game and a Puyo Puyo game. There are modes where you have to swap between the two. It's that game again. I did play against somebody. I totally schooled them, of course. But I did play that game holding the one Joy-Con, and the other person played with the other Joy-Con. And because that game is a puzzle game and not based on precise movements or whatnot, it was still totally fine to play in that configuration. It worked very well. I also played Disgaea 5 Complete. That's a new Disgaea game that's coming out. Again, not exclusive to the Switch. Interesting that they brought this to this event because a strategy game is not something that you really want to experience in a loud setting. These are games that you typically experience by yourself. They're very tactical. Again, totally another one of those Disgaea games, like ridiculous amounts of damage, characters that are over top, a world that's very like you're playing as the bad guys, but they're acting good. Very anime. Yeah.
This game doesn't scream mainstream just because tile-based tactics games aren't as popular as we think they are.
Correct. The most questionable game at this event was Has Been Heroes. This is the $20 budget game that is, if you want the physical version, is only going to be available at GameStop. I think I see why. So this game is a roguelike. It's a lane-based game. It's being made by the people who made Trine. So there are 3 lanes when you play this game, and each character has a lane, and you're basically trying to protect these 2 princesses as you progress through these levels that are in your party. And the 3 heroes, or I'm not sure if there are more heroes in the final build of the game, but 3 heroes are pretty stereotypical knight, a wizard, and also a like rogue thief character. That was basically the 2-minute explanation of that. The way you actually control and play this game and the number of like systems and mechanics, like I had to have I'm somebody who plays a lot of video games, and I had somebody in a very loud setting try to explain this game to me. And for me, I have this very specific theory about games where if you can't explain their premise or how to play them in like 5 minutes, you've overcomplicated the message.
Yeah, you got to have an elevator pitch, especially at events like these.
Right. And I beat the demo of that game, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure how I did. I
don't quite understand the lane situation. What do you mean by that?
So you have your character, your party on the left-hand side of the screen, and you have enemies coming in waves on the right-hand side of the screen. And the enemies come in different lanes, and they have stamina bars that you have to kind of get past with your characters in order to do real damage to them.
Is this like a tower defense game, like a Plants vs. Zombies?
It's kind of like Plants vs. Zombies if the plants were moving. You can actually make like tactical pauses in the game so you can like control actions. There are spells in this game. Each character has different spells. There's an element of like random chance where the enemies are procedurally generated. The abilities that you get each time are procedurally generated. And every character has like a number of like attacks per round. So the knight class has like 1 attack. The mage has 2, and the rogue has 3. And of course, they're like stronger or weaker based on how many moves. There's like cooldowns and spells, and there was a lot going on the screen. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure how I beat it because I was constantly like messing up the controls, and I'm not sure that game is real fun. It feels like very much like a budget title. It doesn't feel like anything special on the Switch. This game could be done easily on iPhone or Android, and it would totally fit in there. I'm not sure how many people are going to pick that up. The last game we'll talk about here is Ultra Street Fighter 2. Yo, you remember Street Fighter 2 from the SNES?
Definitely.
So it's that. However, there are two. They've added some characters. They've added Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, which Violent Ken makes me violent because what are you doing?
Yeah. These are just reskins, though, right? They don't have any new movesets.
Yeah, so there are some characters that weren't in the original Street Fighter 2. They've added Cammy, for example. DJ.
What about Akuma?
Akuma is in there. They've made Street Fighter 2 with some added characters, and the added character like Evil Ryu, Violent Ken, and Akuma all have the like dash move that Akuma typically has.
Oh yeah, the shadow demon step or whatever, shadow step, whatever that's called.
They've added a super meter to this game, and this game is also playable in like an HD mode, and also like it looks more like the original Street Fighter 2, which honestly is probably the way I'd prefer to play it because some of the characters in the HD version of that game, like straight up look like a DeviantArt page, and like not in a good way. Like I was playing Cammy in the HD version. Yo, her face was messed up.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, it was not good. The game controlled totally fine. It would perform very well. It's Street Fighter.
Yeah.
And that game has come out on multiple platforms. It's like it's stupid cheap to get it. It's like it's a classic fighting game. Street Fighter 2 is an amazing game from that era. Why are they re-releasing it on the Switch? And why are they? I think that game they're charging $40 for. They say that there's going to be online matchmaking, which wasn't originally in Street Fighter 2, which I suppose is an added feature. But I'm confused why Capcom is re-releasing that game. And no indication if the online multiplayer is going to be using GGPO or any of the other like third-party fighting game software that like helps people customize their matches or like lag or dip switches or what have you. So yeah, those were like basically that was my 3 hours with a Nintendo Switch. I would say overall it was kind of a mixed situation on the software side. I think the killer app so far for me is definitely going to be Zelda, and I suspect a lot of people. That game was legitimately very, very cool. That game is also coming out on the Wii U, and they haven't really said much about the Wii U version because, of course, they're pushing the Switch version. However, I'm not sure if you're not a huge Nintendo fan, if you're not their hardcore base, that they're really pushing this console for. I got the sense that Nintendo is really going after their fans in a way that they haven't been in quite some time. Almost all of the people that were invited to this event were people who were wearing Nintendo clothing or, had like backpacks, or people who had 3DSs on them. These are people who've like bought many Nintendo consoles over the years. This isn't like your grandma who heard of Wii Sports on the TV and like that. Honestly, the Wii sold, a lot of consoles. There are over 100 million consoles. And that is ludicrous for a home console device. And Nintendo is expecting the Switch to hit in that way. I'm not sure that they will, but it definitely has a lot of their hardcore base very, very excited, which I suppose is encouraging because I don't think the Wii U exactly set the world on fire. And I think some of these games that they're planning, definitely Zelda. There was that gameplay trailer for Super Mario Odyssey. I think people who buy this console as a passport to Nintendo's games are going to be very pleased with their purchase. People who buy this console and expect a large third-party lineup, or like a lot of people to bring these games to parties, like I think those people are going to be very disappointed. For one thing, because the like 1-2 Switch is a game that heavily relies on audio, and when you're in a setting like a party or like this event where there were a lot of people around you, you can barely hear the game. Like that's not a good thing. So, I have pre-ordered this console. I'm very excited to play it. The hardware itself feels very high quality. I think the price is very good. I'm not sure about the price of the games necessarily. I'm not sure about the price of some of those accessories. Yeah. That $70 Pro controller is like, yeah, don't buy that.
But the bundle right now for $300 that comes with, of course, the screen, the dock, the 2 left and right Joy-Cons, the Joy-Con grip, the non-charging one to be specific, but no games bundled with it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
As of now, they may do bundles down the line. Nintendo usually does bundles down the line. I would also say that if you... So they're doing 2 colors of this, right? They're doing the black Joy-Cons and also the red and blue Joy-Cons that I find tacky. But in person, those aren't as tacky.
Really?
Really.
We had multiple people contacting us through Twitter. I even got a few text messages from some of my friends who listen to our show, and they were like, really, you guys hate the blue and red that much? It doesn't come off well in their promotional stuff they have online so far.
In person, it's a little bit better.
Okay.
They're a little more muted. It's not like highlighter red, highlighter blue. It's totally fine. However, I pre-ordered the black one because, of course.
Yeah. It looks less, to me, less like a kid's toy when it's all black versus this blue and red, and then the screen and the bezel around the screen, is also black. That looks like an awkward configuration.
Right. And the thing that gives me pause is that there are a lot of buttons on that controller. Like even on the Joy-Cons themselves that are supposed to be more Wii remote and supposed to be held like they were in an NES controller. There is the stick that you can press in. That's another button like you would on a 360 or PS4 controller. Like an L3, yes. There is the L button. There's the ZL button. Then there are the 2 buttons on the inside that when you dock in, you don't have access to. But when they're undocked from the tablet controller, they become 2 other buttons. And then you have like the A and B equivalents. There's a D-pad, but it's not a D-pad. It's more like the C stick. It's more like the C buttons like they were on the N64.
They're individual buttons.
They've made the D-pad buttons as opposed to a D-pad, which I think is a bad move.
Yeah.
That is not a good D-pad.
That's kind of a shame.
So overall, I would have to say that the Switch is a good proposition if you're interested in Nintendo games. But if you're interested in anything else, I would maybe go elsewhere. We'll have to see what the audience for this console is. I think it will sell. A lot of the pre-orders have already really sold out. I think Nintendo is going to sell a boatload of these, but I think that's not specific to the Switch. I think that's just because it has Nintendo. People would buy a bag of crap that had Nintendo labeled on the side because it was a Nintendo product. Nintendo products generally tend to be very high quality, and the games that they put out for their Nintendo stuff also tend to be very good. Everything else is kind of up in the air. Who knows?
They've never really focused on making the most powerful system out there. They've never focused on, super high-end graphics. And when you have this thing undocked, you're looking at a 720p 720p resolution. And then there are reports that there are frame rate dips when it's in portable mode versus dock mode. In dock mode, it is going to be 1080p resolution. They have confirmed that. And Nintendo really hasn't. They have never pushed their hardware as being graphically superior. The reason you want to play their stuff, like you said, and it seems like the tradition continues with the Switch, is that you want to engage with their first-party characters and those franchises, the Mario Karts, the Super Marios, all that. Zelda, of course. And those are games that people look forward to. And the thing about it is, with the Wii U, they just didn't release those games often enough. And when you have people, there was already brand confusion with the Wii U, with that name itself. You had people who owned the Wii and thought, well, wait a minute, is this a slightly upgraded hardware revision, or is this something brand new? And so it was an utter disaster. And I think that's kind of a shame. But I don't know, to me, based on not necessarily the launch lineup, but the number of developers and publishers that they've announced that they're working with, it seems like they are getting a decent amount of third-party support, but it remains unclear whether or not you're going to see direct ports of games that we see traditionally on Xbox One and PS4. Let me give you an example of this. Like Mass Effect Andromeda, for example. You're probably not going to see that kind of game on the Switch at all, period. Just like the Wii U, right? There were very few games that were properly ported over to that system.
There was they did Mass Effect 3 on the Wii U, but like those kinds of games really only appeared at launch. There was a Batman Arkham game that was like Armored Edition but outside of like launch window, you really didn't see that.
But they weren't optimized. They weren't developed and designed for the Wii U specifically in mind. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be different this time around, because it seems like the Switch can still support these kinds of games without that extra gimmick of the second screen. Do you get what I'm trying to say? The major difference is you don't have that second screen gamepad with the Wii U. And games like Zombie U, for instance, that was a game that completely utilized the second screen. It was part of the gameplay itself. That's what made it compelling. You had to look down, look up, and manage your time in fighting off zombies, but also managing your inventory on the second screen. But when you have the Switch, which is designed to be the same experience, albeit at maybe a slightly slower performance than if it is docked on a TV, it's going to be the same game, period. It's not changing the gameplay fundamentally in any meaningful way, right?
Right. And I will say that as far as like Nintendo gimmicks are concerned, this is a very good gimmick. I think having a console that works both pretty similarly, whether it's at home or on the go, is very compelling. I think the story that they're trying to sell with this console is also very compelling. I can see scenarios where you'd want to play full-featured games like Zelda, like, let's say, if they ever make a Metroid game for this console. I can see the use case for that. Definitely more than I could ever see the use case for the Wii U. I think they've more or less took their beating. The Wii U was like the worst performing Nintendo console to date, and I think they learned their lesson. Whether they have their expectations set too high is maybe another story. But the other thing to remember is that when they announced a console that was going to be both mobile and also a home console, we all thought that they were going to stop making 3DS games, and they have said that they're going to continue to support the 3DS, which is a big question mark for me because, are they going to develop games that would otherwise be on the Switch on the 3DS just because a lot of 3DSs are out there? That console sold very well. It's the latest version of the Game Boy. Nintendo always has had dominance over the handheld market, and now that they've got all these third-party developers lined up to get back into the fold on the Switch, are those developers going to continue to make games for the 3DS? Is this the last year of the 3DS, and then they're just trying to slowly bleed it out before they try to get more people on the Switch? It's hard to say. But I just find that a very curious move that with the release of this hybrid console, that they're not just going out and shooting the 3DS in the foot.
I hope that they don't. I really hope that they don't, because the 3DS, there's so many people out there, especially when you had a recent success in the Pokemon Sun and Moon that sold a lot of units over Black Friday and also over the holiday break. And the fact that they're so hard to find now is troubling to me. It sounds like they are phasing it out very quickly, very rapidly. It's kind of unfortunate. The last things I want to cover about the Switch, which is a big question mark for me, is the overall install size of a lot of these games, because the onboard memory of it, the internal storage, is only 32 gigs, but there is an expandable micro SD slot that does support micro SD and SDHC cards up to 2 terabytes, but those cards actually don't exist. I believe the max right now is currently 256 gigs.
Correct. And I do own one of those cards, and I'm very excited to put that in the Switch. Yeah. But the install sizes on these games are going to be big. Zelda itself, if that's the only game you get, is going to take about 16 gigs of that 32 gig initial OS level size memory that you start off with. You will probably need to get an SD card if you own more than one game for this console. On top of that, we don't know how big the patches are going to be for these games. If the Wii U isn't any indication, they could vary anywhere from, a gig or two to, a few hundred megabytes. But it's hard to say. It depends on what kinds of patches will be on the system. Depends on how many system updates you might have to do over this console's lifespan. There are a lot of questions about that kind of nitty gritty stuff. Questions, of course, about battery life.
Yeah, the only one I've seen confirmed so far, Zelda Breath of the Wild, has been clocked at 3 hours when the Switch is in portable mode. But Nintendo has said the battery life overall is going to last anywhere between 2.5 hours to 6 hours. Of course, in dock mode, it's charging. That's irrelevant. But when it's on the go, that could, depending on the game that you're playing and how intensive it is, that can be anywhere from 2.5 to 6 hours. So interesting. We'll see the difference between different games, what that seems like. Any last thoughts you want to say about the event, about the Switch?
I would say that that wasn't the ideal scenario in which to preview a new console that's coming out in less than a month. I will say that I am very excited for this. The release of a new Nintendo console is always like a big event in video games. It feels like, even if it truly isn't, it always feels like it's the birth of a new generation. Nintendo has always been kind of the more like family-friendly video game company. When you say video games, people don't first think of Sony, Microsoft, Valve, any of these other video game companies that expand the horizon. They think of Nintendo games. When that Super Bowl commercial came out for the Switch, people who I know don't play video games were like, oh, there's a new Nintendo console coming out. Oh, it has that Zelda on it. Oh, I'm immediately interested. I haven't played a Zelda game since Ocarina of Time. Like, they've got the mainstream audience's attention, and they definitely have the attention of people who don't play games very often. They also very clearly have the attention of people who do play games quite often, like you and I. It's depending on Nintendo's usually the swords that Nintendo typically falls on are how many of these consoles can they get out there in the wild? Can they keep up with the demand? Are the games going to be more than just Zelda, Mario, the first party stuff? Are the accessories going to be available and at a reasonable price? Is the online multiplayer? Nintendo has never been good at the online stuff. The Wii and Wii U only had online barely. Are people interested in paying for a Nintendo Switch subscription service that is going to have about half the functionality that other online gaming services have, like PSN and Xbox Live? Who knows? We could all be back to like friend codes next year, having the same conversation about the Switch. But on the outset, I'm very excited about this console. It feels very great to hold in my hand. Like, that Zelda game is going to be probably pretty good. I'm probably going to review that for our site. Who's to say how that game will actually play out? But I'm excited for this console. Your mileage may vary.
All right, let's wrap the show up. That's it. Remember to listen and subscribe to our show, the 1P versus 2P podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn, or Clamor. Or just bookmark our website, as always, 1pvs2p.com, where you can read our gaming blog, too.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast. We're going to post some pictures and videos I took of gameplay at the Switch event. That, of course, you can find on our social feeds and also our website.
As always, thanks to Phonetic Hero for letting us play his music for our show. Those songs are Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X. Both of them are part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win. I'm Taylor Ray. That's my co-host in person this time around, Ryan Reeh. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Bye, guys. top, bottom, as you're stroking. So
Okay.